Hey Kyle, good to
Hey,
see you.
you as well.
So, for our Zoomcast today, I thought I would like to start with just how we met at the Graph conference, and I have that flyer here. I'm going to show it.
Oh
Can you
man.
see it?
Yeah, that was back in 2014, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Time
That was
flies.
amazing. I know. I know. So we have that shared history, and as a pioneer of the spiritual emergence and emergency movement. But
hmm
you also have a connection to breath work. So
hmm
do you want to tell me a little bit about that and the community and the teachers that you have for that?
Yeah, sure. So I ended up at the Groff conference because my teacher Lenny was actually giving a lecture in honor of Stan. So my history with breathwork is that at my school, Burlington College, I was studying transpersonal psychology, and there was a 1 credit weekend workshop, and it said holotropic breath work. And I read a bunch of Stan's work, and I just noticed the for some reason, like, a lot of Stan's work I was reading was more in the psychedelic realm, and I didn't know about holotropic breath work. He didn't mention it in the one book I was reading, so I just noticed his name in the description and said, I'm going to sign up for this. So I
Mm-hmm.
went down to Pollitt, and I participated in a holotropic breathwork workshop for a weekend for school credit, which was awesome.
Wow.
And so the teachers that I studied with, Lenny and Elizabeth Gibson, they're kind of colleagues of Stan. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it,
Mm-hmm.
just through school. And so I spent about 6 years working with them, almost 6 years in October, and working closely, doing my own breathwork sessions. And for anybody that doesn't know what holotropic breathwork is, it's a breathing technique that was developed by Stanislav Grof, who's a Czechoslovakian American psychiatrist who was a pioneer in LSD research, and LSD psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
When he came over to the United States and the counterculture of the 1960s was happening, all that psychedelic research was put on hold. The substances became illegal, and they were using it for psychotherapy for people with, like, a lot of different variations of mental illness, schizophrenia, maybe some like bipolar, OCD, and they were having some
PTSD. Mm-hmm.
PTSD. Yeah, and in America, they were using it for terminally ill people. For that was They were experiencing like near death anxiety. And so when all that research kind of got put on hold, Stan ended up at Esalen over in Big
Mm-hmm.
Sur, California, and they were just experimenting with lots of different, like, breathing techniques. They're hanging out with, like, yogis and shamans, and so Stan and his wife Christina co-developed this breathing technique, and it's a breathing technique to kind of facilitate a non-ordinary state of consciousness for somebody to explore inside. And people that have had psychedelic experiences say it's kind of similar to a psychedelic experience. um,
Mm-hmm.
it can be, and it's a very somatic experience. I found it to be a wonderful technique for integration, but also cathartic release if you're holding on to a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that kind of is part of the lineage that drew me to Stan's work was through the PCC, Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness, at CIS, California Institute of Integral Studies. Stan, when he was doing his work with people in extreme states, and holding space for them and helping sort of create sanctuary for them to go through their process. Rick Tarnas was there,
Mm.
and they were studying the astrological transits and how that influenced some of the extreme states work. And so I was exposed to Stan's work at my time in PCC, and had done a couple of breath works um, in that time, and then also I started to do Maitri breathwork, which is through the Center for Sacred Studies, Jyoti and Russ, who studied and also worked in the SEN with Stan. So I feel you
And
described it.
oh,
Sorry.
sorry. I was going to say the SEN, the Spiritual
Right,
Emergence Network.
Emergence Network, exactly.
Yeah.
Who Ted actually is director of now, and
Mhm.
he's the one that I did a breathwork experience at Esalen with too. So we're all in this community of this resurgence, I think, of this work and the way that the breathwork has supported people. For me, I like the difference of breathwork between entheogens because it's sort of self-directed too. There's a way to, if we need to kind of move out of an extreme state a little bit and move, back into a so-called, more normal state, then we can, slow the breathing and then kind of, drop it down a little bit, if it's getting too intense and stuff. Whereas sometimes with entheogens, it's like, buy the ticket, take the ride, So.
Yeah, there's no getting off until it.
Right, until it's done. It's done
Yeah.
with you. But that, so I think, I remember meeting your teachers too when you were at the Groff conference, and you had said that you'd been working with them for some time. I remember when you came to do your presentation at our Spiritual Emergence group last year, you also shared that you had been developing some curriculum for them and for the school. Is there something do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Well, we were developing. So the school actually is kind of like a casualty in the liberal arts world. So the school actually shut down. But we were in the process of kind of developing a curriculum of kind of like psychedelic studies. But we were bringing this transpersonal psychology back. And so what we were doing, my teachers wanted like a academic affiliate to coach and train people in breath work. So they're trained in holotropic breath work, but since they're not doing it through the Groff transpersonal training, they had Stan's blessing to say, you can pass the work on. So we call it transpersonal breath work.
I see.
So it stems from holotropic breath work. Lenny adds a philosophical component to it, where he brings in Alfred North Whitehead, who's like a mathematician, and so it stems from holotropic breath work, but it kind of has more like an academic-y philosophy flair to it. With Lenny has two PhDs, one in psychology, one in philosophy. So, so we were trying to use the transpersonal psychology program at the school to then use breathwork as a model to train people and give people experience. Because if you're talking about transpersonal psychology, how are people going to understand it without having some sort of experiential component to it? So I ended up creating a class called Stanislav Grof Psychology of Extraordinary Experiences, where we went through Stan's work, and we went through the history of shamanic cultures and the history of non-ordinary states of consciousness and how they were used to facilitate healing for self-exploration and the therapeutic component to it, and how indigenous peoples from around the world would use non-ordinary states of consciousness for everyday life to kind of, the shaman might enter a trance to see where the deer and elk are because they need food, or maybe they ingest a plant to induce healing. So it explored the historical context of that, and we use breathwork as a component to offer an experience for people.
Yeah, it sounds really comprehensive in that you're really trying to understand it cross-culturally, you're trying to understand it transpersonally, and you're trying to give the experiential component. And I think it sounds really amazing. And I wonder if down the road you might offer that as a module for an online program. That would be something
I've been thinking about it. I have this whole syllabus and program, and we taught it 16 weeks, and it just comes down to having the time and putting it together. But yeah, I love to offer it if that's something that people are into. So if you're listening to this and you want kind of like a historical overview of non-ordinary states and their healing potential, then let us know. I I don't know how we would operate the breathwork component to it. Maybe
Do a retreat.
yeah, we do
Do
a
a
retreat.
weekend retreat.
Sign up
Yeah.
and do a weekend retreat in Vermont.
There we go.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's something to experiment with. I'd love to offer that. And then
Yeah.
we were also teaching a history of psychedelics course, so going over like the U.S. and European history behind what people were doing in the 60s, and then some of the re-emerging research that's going on right now with MAPS and the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies.
Right.
So
Exactly. And there is that, that overlap, I think, in some of these, fundamental core concepts, whether we're talking about container work, whether we're talking about integration, whether we're talking about resourcing before and after the experiences, whether they're spontaneous or induced. I feel like a lot of the tools do overlap, and I feel like these communities are really ally communities, and there's a sense that, on our end here too at CIS, we have our new entheogenic training program back in place.
It's really
and I know,
cool.
yeah, exactly. And ERIE, the entheogenic research, integration, and education, was a student group, and now is a non-profit. I know you're familiar with this. And your role in the symposia and working with MAPS yourself, I know that you're talking about the different ways that that you're integrating this work with spiritual emergence and with breath work and with shamanic studies.
Yeah. Yeah, the integration thing's been a huge component of my work. When I came out, when you invited me to come speak to the spiritual emergence group at CIIS, that talk was kind of basically around exploring my own experiences, and then how did I use certain tools to integrate my experience. And breathwork was a big component of it. Studying some shamanic studies was a big component of it. Recently astrology has been a component, learning energy work and stuff like that.
Exactly. There's so many modalities that can be supportive. And I believe as training, therapists in training too, that we're also in a unique position to be able to, if we do choose the licensure track, we can be within the systems and continue to evolve them from the inside, as well as, kind of create new ways and alternatives.
Yeah.
As well.
And that brings up an interesting point because, I think it's important for, these different organizations to kind of have some sort of theoretical framework when, say somebody comes in with a crisis and they're having some sort of spiritual emergence or emergency. And how do you work with that? Our Western paradigm is just give them some medication, give them some Xanax or, something to knock them out. When maybe there could be a different way of working with it and not pathologizing it and saying what you're experiencing is, just a disease. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's an archetypal story that's emerging from within, and it wants to be heard. It wants to be expressed. And so I think I don't know. I think the future of psychology, might embrace some of this stuff.
Yes. I think it is. I think it's moving that direction. I feel like it's a reclaiming of the work that they were doing, back when Psychology of the Future did come out.
Yeah.
And I think that we're recovering from, some of sort of that lash back that happened, in the 80s and 90s of, sort of shutting down these other ways of being able to work. I think it's opening back up. I think we're moving because of the need. And this is something we've also been talking about over the weeks, is that there's such a need now for people's emergence processes to be held in a non-pathologizing, respectful, compassionate way, and supportive, because the gifts that are happening to be awakened in this time are so needed for the healing of this planet. So I feel like you're speaking to that too, that what these experiences are deeper than the individual. They're transpersonal, they're archetypal, but also there's a certain level of collective healing of trauma
Yeah.
And ancestral work, and so many different, all the categories of spiritual emergence, right?
Mhm.
And the energetic component of it, and the spiritual component. So understanding the shamanic templates, and order to be able to say there's certain levels of infiltration, etc. Whatever the framework is, Kundalini awakening.
Mhm.
There's so many different cultural frameworks that are supportive in understanding holistically what's going on in a person that's in an extreme state.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't know. You just talking about Kundalini, for
Mm-hmm.
example, brings up a really interesting point on some of these, just the way our culture is evolving, say with like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and how it's becoming more of a mainstream thing and people are getting into it. And I don't know, like I don't practice yoga as much as I should, or I want to, or I shouldn't say should, but as much as I would like to.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really been to a class. I've had some courses in school in psychology or in yoga, but I wonder if some of these places that teach yoga or yoga teachers and stuff like that talk about some of these experiences that can emerge from
Yeah,
doing this work. Like I
exactly.
remember there's people that have had Kundalini experiences from doing yoga, and are the facilitators versed in that philosophy and know how to contain that. People that go to meditation retreats,
Mm-hmm.
they have breaks because, and then they get kicked out. And
Mm-hmm.
um,
I know,
that's,
exactly.
like, I don't know, it's an interesting phenomenon that, hey, we're doing spiritual practice, but then we're also not holding the space. You're
Thank you.
saying, okay, yeah, I
Exactly.
don't know what happened to you, but you're not allowed back in, you know.
Right. Or the protocols just aren't in place
Yeah.
for continued integration work or support after that type of opening happens, because these practices were created to induce
Mhm.
awakening, to
Yeah.
induce the altered states work,
Yeah.
and to induce the potential for openings,
Mhm.
and so yes, it needs to be in place, that we have the conversations with the people, the facilitators, the teachers, the holders of space, and say, so what's in place before, what's in place after, what's in place during, for people to be supported in this. And if you don't have the resources, time, or support to do that within your system, do you know who to outsource that to?
Mhm.
So that's the thing. It's about just getting the information out there. And I think there's a lot of other communities too, like entheogenic communities, shamanic communities, all types of spiritual communities, like you said, that are doing a lot of work that is very opening to the consciousness.
Yeah, and I only say that because I've known a few people that have had these experiences, and then the container that they had the experience in didn't really hold them, and then
Right.
they're kind of left to their own device.
Yep.
And it's, if we're doing spiritual work and you kind of take this journey, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you should kind of have an understanding of what are the consequences, I guess you want to say. Like
Results.
what are the results? What are the risks of
Mm-hmm.
partaking in spiritual work? And
Right, because some of the risks are, if that's not held in another way that's supportive, people get institutionalized and
mhm,
medicated and pathologized and shut down, and their gifts are totally, shut down and oppressed. And
mhm,
I, as a person with lived experience in that vein, I can speak to how devastating that is, to
mhm,
be in the process of opening and then just be shut down completely, and like having to like kind of crawl, dig back out of that hole,
mhm.
and reclaim, and that's part of my path too, is to be able to do that reclaiming,
Yeah.
and to help other people feel supported as they're going through the process.
Mhm.
So I'm grateful for it, and there's no blame, and there's no victimization. um, but what it is it's just a call to action,
Yeah.
you know
Mhm.
yeah, for us, as advocates, for us to help empower people in experiences, or prior to going into experiences,
Mhm.
and for the people that are the space holders too. I think for
Yeah, I
everyone.
think there's a lot of room for education and evolution.
Exactly.
Yeah, because we are kind of entering into this realm where a lot of different cultures are mixing and mingling, and there's a lot of different traditions that are being shared. And I don't know, are we confused about what are we doing with all of it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And the integrity of certain containers and when they're shared in different cultures, and really honoring lineage, honoring legacy, honoring different like just traditions, and really wanting to be respectful of those. At the same time, um, really being excited about multicultural interaction and the way that, the wisdom of different traditions can come and support one another. So being open to that, and also saying, and yes, I'm respectful. And, like, for example, the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. I did some work with them when I was with the Center for Sacred Studies. And it was so beautiful to see all of these powerful women, medicine healers, leaders of their communities from all over the world come together and share their offerings, share their gifts, share their wisdom. And at the same time, every time we were in a certain location that was where a certain grandmother was from, we did the ritual and the rites and, the ceremonies of that place to honor that place and that particular container. So there's something to be said about, like going back to, the anthropogenic work set and setting, and, it really does depend. And the transits. I mean, Rick, hello, so yeah, there's, auspicious timing, or timing where we can be more prepared to step into something if we know what, different things with different energies are arising, and how that, connects to our charts. So there's a lot of resources that, by pooling them together, can really support people in these processes.
Yeah, man, there's so much stuff there.
I know.
There's so much stuff.
It's true. But it's really rich. And I'm really grateful to be able to just sit and have these conversations, and to share in that hope that things are moving in another direction. And I feel that, going to the Lang conference and really getting to see how everyone's, coming together from different communities and wanting these things, that people from Windhorse and Open Dialogue, Soteria, and the Gnosis House, which is the sanctuary, the Langian sanctuary they want to develop here in the East Bay. So
cool.
My fingers are crossed that things will continue to move forward and have maybe more sanctuaries, more spaces, more retreat centers available for people to come and go through experience.
Well, then you have that place in Asheville, North Carolina.
Yes, the Center for Sacred, the Center for Spiritual Emergence, exactly. And that was really inspiring as a template too, saying like, yes, this is a place where people can come and, have inpatient, outpatient, living in homes in the community, a variety of different classes, groups, structures. It's very comprehensive. So that's a great template for us too.
Yeah. That's really cool. I want to check that place out. It seems really interesting, especially, kind of working in the field, spending some time at Soteria.
Exactly. We're getting primed for the future of what the mental health actually is coming back to, I think, which is what the care of the spirit and the soul, right? We're soul caretakers and midwives and catalysts, and so I'm grateful.
It's exciting time, It's really exciting. A lot of like innovations starting to come out, which is really cool. I mean, just to think about, like a Soteria house opening in the United States. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's kind of like a residential house for people experiencing an early episode of psychosis. And people can live there for 3 to 6 months and no judgment. It's a safe container for people to explore what's going on. And I mean, it was so cool to see that funded by the state too. People didn't need to come, they didn't need to pay to go there, which is really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. It's so amazing how all of our different training and our life experiences and all of that, it seems like it's sort of funneling and coalescing into a vision of working with extreme states and working with resourcing. And for me, I also have a passion, for working with practitioners, practitioners, self-care practitioners, getting the resources they need to be sustainable in
Mhm.
their work, because for us it's like, it is very demanding, and within whether it's an organization or a private practice or whatever, like being able to really show up fully and be able to do what we know that we're capable of doing.
Mhm.
So next time maybe we can talk a little bit about self-care for sensitive souls and practitioners.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, I think that's such an important topic for, people that are doing this work to really do their work.
Yeah, exactly.
To take time for yourself and take care of your own needs, because, if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of other people. Um,
Right.
and that's kind of the reason why I pulled away from doing work, um, professionally, in a sense. Right now, I'm doing
Mhm.
school, so there was just a lot on my plate, and I couldn't like balance everything. It was a lot to hold space for somebody for 12 hours for 40
Mhm.
hours a week, and then try and do school, and it was just like, whoa, my brain is fried.
Yeah,
Like
it's a lot.
the mental stuff of school, and then also like the emotional of holding space for somebody going through a really, really, really difficult experience.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Exactly.
I still like to work with people, but not in a residential setting for 12 hours a day.
Right. Right.
Consulting's fine. It's
Yeah, exactly. Plus, you have SettingSun Wellness. What you're really doing in that structure, which is offering information, resources, tools. The blog is great. I've always
thank you.
loved, and I mean, I also follow you on Instagram, so I love all the images and the
Yeah.
drumming meditations, and just really getting that sort of holistic work out there. And what you did with Wanderlust, doing the hikes and the breath works, and I mean, I really feel like um, you're doing a lot. You are being of service in all of these different ways, and it's really holistic,
Mhm.
actually.
Thank
So
you.
if there's more that you want to share about Setting Sun, or what you offer in that.
Yeah. So, I guess it's been a project that's been going on for probably like 3 years at this point. It's been this idea of how do I take all my life experiences with my near death experience, these experiences with non ordinary states and breath work and shamanism and energy healing and this and that. And then how do I integrate it and then offer it to people. And my initial thing was to kind of do this collective where we get different practitioners and different people that offer modalities to offer their services. And so I was based out of Burlington, so there was a whole bunch of people there that were doing things, but things kind of got stalled when I was working. In mental health, just because I was pouring so much of my emotional and mental energy out professionally that I didn't have the capacity to hold space for people outside of my job, which
Mm-hmm.
was another reason why I kind of wanted to pull back, was to focus more on this project.
Mm-hmm.
But the project kind of really starts off with this idea that I guess it's shadow work in some sense. So I
Mm-hmm.
got the idea for the setting sun, because I've always had this fascination with the West. I've always wanted to go out West. I really kind of have this draw to Colorado, and it kind of stems from the work of Martin Prachtel, who, I don't know how I got into his work. I think it was through a course I was taking at college, and some of what he was saying in shamanistic cultures is that sometimes you have these hungry ghosts. These spirits are still left over, and maybe generationally down the line, like somebody in your family didn't cross over completely, or there was like some big trauma, and it's just been kind of lingering. And
Mm-hmm.
so during a news article or a write-up, he said that these ghosts are real, and they always chase the people towards the setting sun of the West. And if you
Mm-hmm.
think about human migration for the past like thousands of years, it's always been towards the West. Um, and so when you look at it through a psychology lens or a scientific lens, like they're coming out with some really cool research about epigenetics, how
Mhm.
what happened maybe 5 generations back is impacting you. So in a
Mhm.
sense, like from the shaman's view, you have this narrative of ghosts or spirits or spiritual forces, and then through psychology you have this story of epigenetics. It's these stressors and these traumas that kind of have an influence on your gene expression, and then that's passed down, and it's
Yeah.
passed down, and it's passed down. So I think
Mhm.
it's the same narrative, just different story in some sense,
Exactly.
different words, different language. And
Mhm.
so I think, this idea, when you do breath work and you engage in ritual and ceremony and some of these things, it brings up a lot of inner stuff. And I think the inner work is where the real meat of the work in life is. I had a teacher tell me once, he's like, you're not going to save the world, and it was the best advice I could ever hear, because I think it's true that we live in this world where the archetype of the hero is
Mm.
everywhere. You go to the movies and it's like this hero archetype. And I think like we're at this point where, not everybody has to go out and slay the dragon,
Mm.
I think some of the real work is just sitting and exploring inside of who you are, and maybe exploring some of this like intergenerational trauma and sitting with some of that shadow. It's not for everybody, but
Mhm.
I think I think that's some of the most important work. I mean, I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe that's just my bias, because I've had this, like, I've had a lot of like non-ordinary experiences, and that's just kind of what interests me. But
Mhm.
having an experience with death and kind of like being so close to death, it shows you that there's a lot more to life, and
Mhm.
that no- what we normally go through. And
Yeah.
but when we're just constantly bombarded by somebody else's story, the news, the media, this and that, that's all you know. But
Right.
there's a really cool story inside of you. And,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
there's techniques to get there.
Yeah.
And we were asking my one teacher, how would you pitch breath work to somebody? And he just said, "Are you curious?
Mm.
Are you curious about your relationship to the universe?
Mm. Mhm.
And if not, go watch a movie. Like go listen to some music, go pay attention to somebody else's story.
Mhm.
But, you have this story inside of you, and it's just about tapping into it. And
Mm.
what other story do you really want to know in life? I mean, you are, in some essence, the center of your universe. That's all you really know.
Mm.
So I think the setting sun is about kind of tapping into that narrative of who you are as a person, so you can kind of be the best person that you were meant to be, and to
Mm.
walk this, find the path that you came into life to walk. Um, and that's something that,
Exactly.
Dancing with Death has kind of taught me. Like we're all here to walk a path. And,
Mhm.
I think basically we're all good in nature. We've just kind of all forgotten either where we come from, or these traumas and these stressors in life have kind of got us off track. And it's about coming home.
Yeah.
It's about not chasing the sun all the time. It's about just being and coming
Mhm.
home to yourself.
Mm. Mhm. Yes, I hear so much in there, and I just really thank you for sharing that, for sharing your passion around that work, which it sounds like it's both a returning to an essential nature of who we are as individuals, but also the role that we play in the larger community
Hmm.
by becoming that person that we can be.
Yeah.
And as much as there's epigenetics, there's neuroplasticity.
Right.
There's the ability to change things, and the ability to, when we have new information, to integrate it. When we
Hmm.
have these structures that are, like you said, trying to inform our reality, that are incongruent with what we believe and what we feel inside of ourselves, we can actually have agency and choice
Hmm.
to make a new reality.
Hmm.
And it sounds like, sometimes the setting sun is letting go. right? As much
Mhm.
as it is, opening to the nighttime sky.
Mhm.
Like you said, that shadow work. So it's really, really rich. And I feel like there's a lot of room for a lot of different types of exploration, it sounds.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And, um, I still like to travel, and, there's
Yeah.
still kind of that thing that I might want to go out to Colorado eventually. So I'm still chasing the sun. I'm going to school out in Arizona. I
Right.
go out there every once in a while. So,
Yeah.
the work is never complete. It's an
Exactly.
ongoing process, but it's just about being aware of it,
Mhm.
and just learning how to be. I think there's, in today's society, the grass is greener on the other side,
Mhm.
and your problems follow you no matter where you go, and if
Mhm.
you're not sitting and dealing with it in the moment and in the present moment and now, it's just going to continue to follow you. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of this work kind of comes back to mindfulness, and
Mhm.
it's just being in the moment and realizing that the work is happening now, and then how do you sit with that process and be okay with it, just
Mhm.
being okay with not having to do something grandiose and big and magical. I mean, some of the magical stuff just happens right here, right now.
Mhm.
Something
Mhm.
small, a small little ripple can be big in a pond.
It's true.
And it's about
It's
community, community,
true.
community, community. Just small little things in your community can really, really make an impact. And
Mhm.
you don't need to go do something crazy.
Mhm. Mhm. Because I think the inner world is just as vast and just as transformative.
Hmm.
And I also am a believer that the work that we do on ourselves is holographic in nature. It does have the capacity to change things.
Hmm.
So by shifting those, like you said, those perspectives, or shifting the energies, it's like, well, when we walk out and model in the world what it means to hold space in a compassionate way
Hmm.
in any interaction, right? Whether it's at
Hmm.
the store or in the park or whatever, just being that, like you said, living that in
Right.
integrity,
Hmm.
that changes things. And like you
Yeah.
said, the ripple in the pond, I think it can really, the more of us that are awakening, the more of us that are integrating and being able
Hmm.
to walk on this planet with these new energies, I think we'll be able to change things even that much more easily. So.
Yeah, definitely. I just came across some guy said like why he used to work with entheogens and stuff like that, or I mean, you can convert that to even just doing breath work or some sort of inner
Mhm.
work. You know, Sometimes you have this magical experience and it's beautiful and whatnot, but at the core of it, why do you do it? Maybe to make yourself a little less of an asshole in the world. Like you just realize like, wow, like I don't have to be so impatient in the grocery line. Like I can just
Right.
be, and
Right.
it's just like I don't need to sit there and get road rage. It's just like, okay, that's just the way the world is working right now. And I think a lot of this work just teaches you that on how to
Yes.
be a little bit less of an asshole in the world. And
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes a big difference. It
yeah.
really does.
Hmm. Or even just holding the door open for somebody, like how many times have you walked and somebody just hasn't held the door open and you're just like, what the hell?
I know we're fine tuning, fine tuning,
Yeah.
being better people in the
Yeah.
world.
And
Yeah.
I'm no saint,
Yeah.
we all have our, we fall
That's the
back.
shadow work,
Yeah,
right?
we
That
fall
we're
back into
also are
habits.
assholes.
We are assholes, yeah. I mean, but that's why you do the work, to be a little bit more or less of an asshole, because it's just
Uh,
human nature, and
yeah.
nobody's perfect. Like we could sit here and talk about all this stuff, but when it comes down to it, we're all human. We're all going to
Yeah.
make mistakes, and we're going to fall back into the same habits.
Yeah.
And I think it's just about becoming aware of those habits and working with it.
Exactly. Exactly. And incorporating practices that
Mhm.
support that continual inquiry, that continual, questioning of things that we take for granted or things that become, like you said, habitual. It's like, is there a way to, on the one hand, have really, good structure and also have enough freedom and openness to inquire whether that structure is even relevant anymore. Is
Mm-hmm.
it time to evolve something new? And doing that in all areas of our lives. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, the embodied work, the somatic work, the combination of doing that with the processing of the mind and emotions, just, having a variety of modalities to offer. I mean, I think that's the tool belt, whether we're
Mm-hmm.
doing our own inner work, because sometimes we can't see ourselves too. So it's
Mm-hmm.
nice to, like you said, have community or have a therapist or, a practitioner to work with that can mirror and reflect what we're not able to see in ourselves, or to help us see ourselves that much better.
Right. The group aspect, group process, the group is going to call you out for being an asshole because you can't see it,
Right.
Um,
Right. Or other things that, even, like Robert A. Johnson says, the gold in the shadow,
mm,
right? The parts of ourselves that are the ideal parts that we project outward and don't, say, yes, I do have that the capacity for greatness as well,
mhm.
and I think that's, something that especially in Western culture, it gets so sort of overblown, like the aggrandizement and stuff. But really, I think there's this other side of that, which is the humility. Um,
Mm,
and I think that sometimes having too much humility means that we dim our own light, and then we
right.
don't, step out and offer our gifts. And so, for me, it sounds like too what you're saying is by really getting that support, whether it's in community or doing our inner work or whatever, it's like really reminding us what we do have to offer out
Hmm.
there in the world.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Oh man, I feel like we could keep going on and on and on.
probably.
And maybe I would love to talk about humility. I would love to talk about, these different modalities that people can
Hmm.
use.
Hmm.
Because I mean, there's so many out there, and like, when do you use it? How do you use it? Like, which modalities do you use?
Hmm.
Maybe this is all stuff that we can touch on our next Zoomcast, or in an online course, or you know.
Exactly. Exactly. There's so much to explore and to offer. And thank you so much for speaking with me today and sharing. It was really great.
Yeah, thanks for holding the space and listening, and thank you to everybody that's out there that might be listening. And if there's anything that caught your attention, anything that you want to know more about, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. We just want to keep growing and offering our wisdom and our knowledge to you. So, let's interact. You can reach out to us. I'm at settingsunwellness.com. And where are you at, Michelle?
BecomingSacredSpace.com.
And Michelle has a spot on the Setting Sun Wellness website, and there's a link. If you go to about to friends, she's under the friends category, and her website link is there. And so, reach out to us.
Great.
Let us know. And thanks for listening, everybody. All right. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Kath.